Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for our big event. I hope you can sit back and enjoy yourself, grab a refreshment. Maybe your kids are off to bed, or maybe you've waited to watch us when they are in bed. But we have a great evening planned. But before I get started, first of all, my voice is a little rough. I think it's allergies, but of course Father Baiju tells me it's because I talk too much. Imagine that. So I most importantly want to thank all of you for partnering with the staff, with Mrs. Lonham and myself, with this whole NTI program. It has been a great success because of all of you. And we, spoke to the teachers in the past week or so, and they're just singing your praises and the support that you're giving them. So thank you for that. Tonight we're going to talk about our book, The Gift of Failure. We've talked about our book. Some of you have read it, some of you have not, but the topics are surrounding the gift of failure. Ironically, embracing challenges, embracing difficult times has showed up on our doorstep in the past month. So I'm not sharing anything difficult, and you've handled it beautifully as you've worked with us with school, but maybe you can look at this as just a pep talk, because I think we all need a pep talk right now so we can be encouraged to move forward. So enjoy your pep talk. I would like to introduce the speakers tonight. The first speaker is my younger brother, Father Matthew Summy. And you may say, oh, what does he know about children and failure? But let me just tell you, when you have 4 sisters and 5 brothers and 40 nieces and nephews that you embrace on a daily basis, he even goes on family vacations with us and lives with us for a week. And like my youngest daughter, Ellie, always says, wow, Mom, I think we give Father Matthew a lot of information or a lot of material for homilies. And we do. So he has a great pulse on what's going on out there with families and the challenges that we embrace. The second couple is a dear friend of mine, our beloved DRE, Janet Lees, and Tim, her husband, and they have 7 children. And they're going to kind of reference more the challenges and opportunities that come within the daily life journey, but also within school and with the choices that our children make. And the third couple is also someone very near and dear to my heart. This couple, their kids, they have 5 children like Jerry and I, and we've raised our kids together at St. Pius, and they're all about the same age. So they've been on our journey with us, and I think so highly of them and the great kids that they have. And so that's Andy and Amy Mayer. With that said, I will have to tell you that Tim Lees and Andy Mayer kind of were celebrating about the event being canceled. So with that said, they're going to get so many graces tonight for us rescheduling the event on them. But we feel like this event is so important for all of you. And I think we're all in kind of a good place to kind of reflect and take this in before we immerse ourselves back into the hustle and bustle of what we used to revere as normal. And maybe we can make some adjustments along the way. So thanks again and enjoy the evening.
Good evening, everyone. It's my joy to bring this message to you from this special time of quarantine where we're all still chomping at the bit to get back to ordinary life. But I think as we head through this Easter season, I think it's a good reminder of our Lord throughout his life and throughout his ministry. And in a particular way now, during this Easter season, has invited us to discover that so many things in life are out of our control. And we have to learn how to discover in those things his presence in our life, especially the hope that he can bring, that he brings to us through the death and resurrections that take so much a part of our lives. In today's discussion, there's going to be some different things around the gift of failure that you all were invited to read. And I think the gift of failure is much more than just thinking about the failures of our life. I think all of you are good parents, and so you want to protect your children, and you want to nurture your children and protect from them all the difficulties and the heartache and the pain. And I think what really defines a parent is the desire to nurture and also to comfort. But there's so many things in our life, actually half of our life, are not necessarily only the positive things. And so I want to start by giving my first point is a little bit about how in God's providence, all of our life is part of our journey. We would like to be able to pick and choose. We would like to be able to go through and only have positive moments, but that's not our experience. That reality is where we find God. And God is in all of it, and His providence is good in all of it and through all of it. And so our life, very simply, isn't just positive moments. There's also very challenging moments. And so I wanted to kind of walk with you, how do I process that? Because as parents, it isn't just your job to comfort and to nurture. It's also very important that you help your children to process the different events of their life and walk away with a deep and abiding meaning. Because that's what gives coherency to the journey of our life. All of us are walking through this journey of life, and it takes us in different directions. Some intended, some unintended. Sometimes we think that we're opening a new door, and yet we have to close other doors because life is a series of events and openings and closings, and each one of those is really a gift to ponder. So there's just a few things that I would like to share with you about my experience of how to process failure. One thing is that life is about growing. It's about development. And tonight you're going to hear different things spoken about schooling. You know, the vice principal, Betsy, is going to speak a little bit about what it means to be a parent in the school. And then the mayors are going to talk a little bit about how do you deal with it in sports. And the Lises are going to talk a little bit about how do you deal with it in life. But development requires a starting point where we are today and a growing point, something that we're striving for, an ideal. And as we've all learned, that nobody begins at perfection and nobody ends at perfection. Even when you're the greatest athletes or the greatest students, you all begin somewhere. And it usually begins with some place, like when you're learning, you begin in ignorance. You don't know, so you have to learn. So it's funny, sometimes as you look back through the course of your life and you start thinking about who am I today and who do I want to become, we have to remember back those first steps that we took, and we have to say that today we look back at those and we'd say they were awkward and they were maybe failures. But were they really? Were they really? Because weren't they the beginning points? And isn't every beginning point a little awkward? And so I think as we go through life, you have to really ask yourselves, what do I want for my children? And what you want the most for them is that they can grow into who God is calling them to be and to have the impact and the unique contribution that they're called to make in this world. And that requires growth. And that requires starting again over and over again. That requires choosing new paths and working your way through those paths. It requires stumbling and getting back up. And I think that is just part of the whole dynamic of life. The second thing that I wanted to kind of highlight is that throughout life, if we only highlight the positives, then half of our life is gone. We lose half of our life because not all of our life is all positive. And so we have to, as we look at our children's life, we have to teach them how to cope with all of their lives. And so otherwise we can really stunt their ability to see how it all fits together. How does one thing flow into another? I also like to talk a little bit about not only those two extremes of our life, where you learn the positive and the negative, is the starting point of discernment. What I mean by discernment is your ability to see the value in things. To see, is this good for me? Is this bad for me? And that comes in moral decisions that we make. Well, that wasn't really good for me. It comes in simple decisions for our family. This is good for our family. This isn't good for our family. I was speaking with a mom the other day, and she was telling me that it's the first time in her life that her children are living life without sports and extracurriculars. And she says it's really been a challenge because they've had to look at the crazy life that they were living before this moment, when everything slowed down, when life came to a halt. And she says some of these moments that they're having now as a family, and the dinner that they have each night as a family, is maybe something that she would miss if she went back to the hectic lifestyle that she had before. And so all of a sudden she's looking at something that maybe wasn't bad in itself, but maybe wasn't the best for her family. So she's starting to weigh. But before, she didn't have those experiences of life. So was it a failure? Is it a challenge? What do we call that? We call it life. And so she's starting to weigh the good and the bad for her family. And sometimes it isn't, and I think it's the same way with our children. As they go through life, and as they struggle, as they fail, as they get up, as they try, and they try again, sometimes successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, as we propose things for them, sometimes which they enjoy, sometimes which they don't enjoy. That is the journey of life. And I want to share a story with you. When I was a sophomore in high school, I experienced a failure. Right? I was at school, and it was math class. And so it was a really hard year. Sophomore year in high school was a really hard year. And it really wasn't because of math. It's not that math was particularly difficult for me. I normally did really well, and I was taking 2 classes in math that year. But because of all the other things that were going on, just my friends' situation was changing. The group dynamics of who I was hanging out with was starting to shift. The sports that I was playing, I was looking for something new. Some of my friendships, dating, all of the complex things that go into adolescent life were coming on me at that particular moment. I hadn't grown yet, so I felt like I was one of the shorter ones in my class, and I was insecure about that. You know, the typical things, acne, you're like, oh my gosh, life is difficult. And I remember some of those things made that life, at that particular moment, very difficult to navigate as a young adult. And so I came to my math class, and I found a teacher who we butted heads. And so, although I didn't do bad on the exams, I didn't turn in my homework. So little by little, accumulation of zeros are not good for GPA. So the first quarter, I really bombed. And back then, you only had the written reports. So your parents couldn't look online to see what you were doing, right? So you could get away. It was more dramatic because at the end of the semester, you're like, boom, here it is. So then the second quarter, my mom was riding me, so I bumped it up enough, right? And so we played this game. I played chicken with my teacher, and in the end, I lost, right? But it was interesting. As the year progressed, I just did enough, and I thought I would just make it enough to get by. And I remember she came to me at the end of the year, and she said, you have like a 69.5. And she says, I'm going to fail you. And I just thought, you know, not only is this a hard year, but I have an evil woman as a teacher, and this is life piling on, I'm a victim, this is terrible. And I'm like, why are you so mean? And she's like, I'm trying to teach you a life lesson. I think sometimes you have a lot of potential, and you just need to live up to it, and I think this will help you to really deal with that. And I just thought the opposite. I'm like, you're just mean, and you're ruining my life, and everything is going wrong, and you're just piling it on. And so in that particular moment, she wasn't my favorite teacher, obviously. So I remember my mom came to me, and she says, now what are we going to do, mister? And she's like, I have 9 other siblings, and I don't have a car. You know, this is going to be very challenging logistically. And so she went in and she convinced the principal to let me do a correspondence course, a college correspondence course, which she told me very clearly that I was the one responsible for collecting it, sending it in. And like I said, math wasn't really the issue. I got a 99% for the class, but and I went on to go into college, and I was in engineering and calculus, and so it really wasn't what it was about. But it was an important lesson. And only in hindsight, years later, do I realize that my teacher did have my best interest. And she taught me a lot of things, actually. One, that I don't like to be in school, but I like to learn. So that's for some of those. There might be some of you out there who can appreciate that. And I've been a lifelong learner, and it's taken me through, you know, multiple degrees and graduate degrees. But the point is that defining moment was something that helped me to grow, even though in the moment I didn't think it would. And so I think, sometimes we can't protect our children from everything in life because life will be full of those opportunities, full of those things that they have to learn just by living and experiencing. And so as we think about all these things, we have to learn how to find God in everything, because God is in everything. in the good, the bad, the sad, the joy. And the life of our Lord in this Easter time shows us that we can't be afraid. We can't be afraid of what life throws at us. And we can't be afraid of what life is throwing at our children. You can't live their lives for them. And obviously as they grow from smaller to young adults and into their late teens, and as they become young adults and professionals, they have to learn how to manage things. And although you're with them every step of the way, you have to learn how to see things with new eyes. And so I just invite you this evening to not be afraid, to really see that life is a beautiful journey and an adventure. And in that adventure, all the different moments have meaning if you can find them and find the meaning in it. And so with our Lord, everything has a beautiful value. We just celebrated Holy Week where our Lord died for us. And for some reason, some strange reason, we call it Good Friday. How could it be good? Was there anything good that went on during that day? Well, there was. Because God was able to go into the darkness of our life, the challenges of our life, and bring love. And if we bring love to every situation, whether it be joyful or sorrowful, whether it be challenging, whether you be upset, no matter what the situation, if you bring love into it, you'll discover that God can do great things through it. And so I just invite you to enjoy the journey and not be afraid. Not be afraid of all the moments of our life and to find the meaning of them, in them. And may God bless you, and may you have a wonderful evening.
Hi, everyone. Like Betsy said, we are Tim and Janet Lees, and I am privileged to be the DRE at St. Pius. I'm privileged to talk tonight, too. Tim and I have been married for 36 years. We have 7 children and 12 grandchildren, and our 13th on the way. So through all of those years, we have seen our ups and downs. We have seen many struggles, trials, and many joys and triumphs. And so the whole theme of the gift of failure, or the beauty that comes out of difficulty, is something that we can really feel like we can speak to from our real life experience. I often tease, now being at St. Pius, that with our 7 children, we have the child that every teacher wants. And we've also had the children who every teacher didn't want. So as a parent, I feel like we have been on many sides of this coin that probably you have been on too. And so we're just going to speak to what we have found in our experience. Interestingly, so yesterday, as I was preparing this talk, I was sitting at the counter with our daughter, who is at home right now. She's 22. Our children range from 33 years old and to our youngest, who is 17. Our first 6 children are biological, and our 7th is adopted. And so there's a 6-year span from our 6th child to our 7th child. So I was with our 6th child yesterday, sitting at the counter, and she had just gone on an interview. She had no idea that we were going to give this talk. And so she said to me, "Mom, it was really weird. The final question they asked me was, what is your greatest accomplishment and what is your greatest failure?" And she said, I found both of those questions kind of awkward, because I thought, well, I could say my greatest accomplishment was I put myself through college, I've done a half marathon. And she said I could think of things from a worldly perspective that I could say. But what I told him was that I felt like my greatest accomplishment, or the times that I feel very accomplished, is when I am with someone and I feel like I have loved well. And for a mom, that was a really beautiful thing to hear her say, because I feel like that's what we've tried to teach them, that at the end of the day, the most important thing that you take with you and that you'll answer to God for is the love that you gave. But then what I found more interesting with the talk that we're going to give tonight is what she said she felt about failure. She said, I felt like the word failure, and I told them, was such a finite word, and that even as Christians, that doesn't even make sense. That failure really is never the final word. That if I failed, I hope that I would understand that there's something that could come from it, something that I could learn from it. And I just found that really beautiful to hear her say in this moment as we're getting ready to give this talk. And so it prompted me to think, okay, I'm going to text the other kids and see what they think. Why not have them speak to what did we hopefully teach them about the struggles and the difficulty that life has brought over the years. So I just wanted to share with you a couple things, kind of from the oldest to the youngest, which gives a funny perspective. My oldest daughter said this. Our oldest daughter said this. Sorry. Okay. Maria said, I think there are two things. Number one, encouragement, empowerment. I think you and Dad did a really great job allowing us to become our own person, have our own interests, and make decisions about those things. Number two, most important, you loved us no matter what our decision or outcome was. I think that is honestly the greatest lesson you taught me, the most tangible reality of God's love. Then our second oldest son said this.
Mm-hmm. There it is. Okay, so our second oldest, who's our first son, our oldest son, said, you helped us up, you didn't pick us up. You taught us when we fell, whether it was physically or spiritually, that we had one option, to get back up and to keep going. But you were there to help us. But you didn't do it for us. That way, as time went on, we learned how to pick ourselves up and keep going. If you always would have picked us up, or worse yet, kept us from falling at all, we never would have learned how to get up on our own.
And then the funniest is from our youngest. So I said to her, okay, Grace, I want to know what you think. And she said, oh, come on, Mom. I said, I'll fix dinner as soon as you give me your opinion. So she says, okay, to learn from our mistakes and move on from them. And don't do it again. Now, do I get dinner? So I guess maybe we should have had them give the talk. But it has been a real blessing for us to do this because it prompted a lot of really wonderful conversations, because most of our children are now grown and we have grandchildren, we only have the one at home. Some of these things, while they were so acute at the time, are not a part of our present reality. And so it was good to think and reflect about all the things that God has taught us through the many struggles and challenges that we had, but specifically with the children. So there's many things that we have learned with the adversities and struggles and sufferings in our life. And it made me think of this word grit that we keep talking about. Like, what is grit really made of? What is it that not only gets us through difficult times, but really, what is it that makes us or our kids actually be better because of it? Tim and I, as we talked, decided we would boil it down to 3 things, and I'll describe them in order of the importance that we think they are. Number 1 is to trust God. And number 2, to let the difficulty be the place of learning or purifying for your child or you that God sent it to be. And the 3rd is to stay united to God and to each other, to your child, and to really everybody involved. Okay, so like I said, for us the most important was trusting God. When I was a little girl, or really my entire life as a child growing up, my mom would always say, no matter what happened in our lives, everything happens for a reason, Janet, and God has a plan. And I was number 8 of 9, so I think Mom had lived long enough to know that that was true. You know, she had lived long enough and through enough things, through all 9 of us and the 6 brothers ahead of me, that everything happened for a reason and God had a purpose. But as I grew into adulthood and became a parent, I had to decide, do I really believe that? And do I believe it so much that I want to teach my children that? Well, we do. We do believe that, and we do want to teach our kids that. So in reality, when push comes to shove, do I really believe that God is in control or not? Because if he's not in control, then I have to be, or somebody better be. It's kind of disorienting as we all have felt when something happens that we weren't expecting, something that wasn't a part of our plan. And you know, whether we realize it or not, sometimes we don't know that we have a vision for how life is going to turn out, or expectations of how life is going to turn out, and we don't really realize that until it doesn't happen. And in those moments, in those difficulties, and in those sufferings or setbacks, we have to really think, do I really believe that God's in control? Do I really believe that God has a plan? Do I really believe that God will help us get through this? That God will help my child get through this? That there is a purpose in that he has a plan? Or am I going to feel angry, frightened, confused, not knowing what to do? And I may feel that too. I may feel all of those things. But ultimately, do I believe that God is in control, and do I believe that he has a plan? And really in our lives, that's been the first and fundamental question. And therefore the first and fundamental decision that we have to make on how we approach the situations and the attitude that we're going to have towards it. Like, are we going to trust that God's in control? Because when we do trust, we're kind of more open and receptive to reality, even if it's different than the reality that we had hoped, or we had dreamed, or we had thought. It just really helps us to remain positive and open to what is really happening. And if we don't believe that God's in control, I think the first human temptation is to resist it and to be pessimistic and negative about it. And often, sometimes to even feel like a victim to the circumstances that are happening. So the fundamental key for us has been to choose with our will to believe, when often our hearts were in a bit of a mess, that God is in control. One phrase I say a lot to the kids, and often to myself, is, God knows. God knows. Because oftentimes when I don't know, we don't know, the kids don't know, sometimes it's just a moment of orientation to say, yeah. God knows. He's not sleeping. Somebody will say, he's not sleeping. He knows this is happening. And this puts my heart back on the rock, so to speak. And so the waves of the storm kind of can simmer their effect on me, on us, when we just stop and say, God knows. Knowing that God is in control, I think, really helps us release the control, that sense of powerlessness, anger, woe is me, right? And that feeling that this is just not fair. And I think we've all felt that when things come at us, that they catch us off guard and they're not what we thought, and we have an array of feelings, but there's just something orienting about knowing that God's in control. I think one of the times, we've talked about so many different circumstances, having so many children, being married so long, and even health issues, and our first granddaughter died, and we've had many different things in our life where we've had to trust together and hold on together that God was in control. But honestly, I think one of the most recent things in years was our youngest daughter, like we said, is adopted. And she has a lot of needs that are different than our other 6. And so while we were 7th-time parents, you would think we would know what we were doing. We felt very much like we were in kindergarten, and we didn't know what we were doing. And all of her learning disabilities and different circumstances that were really different from the other children left us feeling powerless and confused and often frightened how to meet her needs. And at one point, we had kept trying to keep her on a normal track, so to speak, of the track that the other kids were on. and knowing that that's what she wanted as well. And there was one point when the principal at the school she was at, the high school she was at, had to tell us with great love, you know, kind of like St. Pius. We were at Mount Notre Dame with just an amazing team of loving people who really had our child's best interests in mind. And we had to come to a moment that was very difficult to realize that they couldn't help her, that her needs were beyond what the school had. And I know that that call was very hard for the principal because we're good friends, and it was hard to hear, and it was hard for her to say. And we knew for Grace it was going to be very painful because she loved that school, but she was drowning in the academic difficulty. And I remember that day, like, getting the text from her, Janet, I need to talk to you. And I kind of knew what she needed to talk about. And I just sat in the garage and just cried for a minute before I went in. And I thought, okay, Lord, you're in control. Yeah. You got this. You know, you're not sleeping, you know. And it was just a really hard time to have to trust her, you know, we trusted Karen totally. And to have to tell Grace, and to trust that what God had ahead for her was going to be good. And it was a moment of saying, God, this is your answer, and we're just going to trust you. I mean, it doesn't make sense. We're really sad. We're really disappointed. It's not in our plan, but we're just going to really trust you. And God is so good, because Grace started online schooling, and it's just been the most beautiful thing for her because she has just blossomed. She's such an amazing kiddo, and she has been able to just blossom in that environment. And there were things that we never knew about from our other 6 kids that God provided for her and took care of her in ways that we would have never known had we not faced that terrible disappointment and hardship at that moment, right?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, this plan was not only good, it was better.
Yes, it was,
Better.
right?
Yeah.
It was better than we could ever have hoped for, but it was just that moment, right, of hitting that wall and that disappointment. So while there's so many things about God that really help us trust Him, I think there are 3 things that we want to talk about that help us really, really trust God when the certain things happen that are just hard to embrace. And the first is that God is bigger. God is bigger. We as Catholic Christians are in this Easter season, our season of hope. We believe that God can bring good out of the greatest horror of humanity. I mean, crucifying Jesus, killing God, was the biggest horror of humanity. And not only did He bring good out of it, but it was the heart of our salvation. And so we are Easter people. We are people of hope, and Alleluia is our song, like John Paul II said. So we are people of hope, and there just takes sometimes a moment to stop and say, God is bigger, because sometimes what we're going through can feel huge. And just to remember that God is so big, and He can handle this, and not only can He handle it, but our God has the ability to take that which is so horrible and not only redeem it, but make it better than it was. And I think we've all had things in our lives when we look back and we go, wow, that was hard. But years go past and we go, that was a really great thing. And I think Father Matthew talked about that. Like, when it's happening, you think the world is ending, and then when you look back, things are really great. But I think if we really believe that, we can begin to see it even in the here and now. It doesn't have to be in retrospect. And what we have been doing all year with the kids is teaching them about God moments. We have been teaching them to see God in the real, right here and right now. And we've been teaching them about, talking about highs and lows, that, you know, God's not only present in the highs, but God's present in the lows. And so we've been really trying to help them understand that God is with us all the time, in all of it. And if we decide to trust Him, we can have the eyes to see it if we try, right? And that's just been a beautiful thing with the kids all year. Just an interesting story with our daughter. We have our oldest daughter has 6 children, and she said to the kids, how do you feel about the coronavirus? And they said, Mommy, we're afraid. And she said to them, God is bigger than the coronavirus. Okay, we are going to be smart and we're going to do what we're supposed to, but we are not afraid of the coronavirus because God is with us and God is bigger. Okay. Are we afraid of the coronavirus? And the kids in the van said, no, Mommy, we are not afraid of the coronavirus.
No.
The other for me is that God is here. One of my favorite passages in scriptures is, I will be with you always, even until the end of time. I think all of us humans are afraid to be alone, especially when we're struggling. It's hard to think that we will be alone. But God is always with us, always willing to help us and give us wisdom if we just ask. I can remember one time, it's so silly, but we had 3 boys in a row. And they were all boys, and I was toast. I was just struggling with all the mischief and the mayhem. And I went for a walk. Tim was so good he would go to work later so I could take a walk and breathe. And I just remember, like, Lord, you have got to help me. This is a mess. These boys are out of control. They're misbehaved. And this is no lie. I looked down on the ground and there was this little key of paper. And I've laminated it. It's in my prayer book to this day. And it says, I am with you always, even until the end of time. And I think it was just God saying to me, Janet, it's not as big as you think it is. Everything's going to be okay. Take a deep breath, girlfriend. I'm there with you. Move on. The other thing that really helps me is to know that God is love. God loves me. God loves the kids. God loves Tim. God is here. Everything he's permitting is out of love and goodness. Like he would never hurt us. One of my favorite saints is Saint Teresa, and she always says, choose what you have not chosen. Accept reality as it is. And remember, all he knows how to do is love. All he knows how to do is love you. And so for me, sometimes it's just a moment of orientation to say, he's here, he's bigger, he loves me. I know he loves me, and he wants me to love. And it's been so beautiful to work with the kids this year at school because we keep telling them, Betsy's so good at telling them, you were created for one thing, to give love and to receive love. And so love can have many faces. But if we know that we're called to bloom where we're planted, rooted in Christ, that blooming is giving love and receiving love. And that rooted in Christ is believing that God has created in us in love, he wants us to love, and that we have to, in every circumstance, think, how can I love? And as a mom and a dad, sometimes love is just being understanding and listening, and sometimes love is saying, I need to let you accept the consequences of your choices, and I need to let you suffer, and I need to let you go through this so that you can learn the lesson you're supposed to love, what you're supposed to learn. And I think it's really important for us parents to realize that letting them learn the lesson that they need to learn is a really loving thing to do. The second thing is to allow the situation to teach what it's supposed to teach. Not only for the child, but for us as well. Mm-hmm. That there's a lesson, a purification that God is permitting for everything that we go through. And I remember as a young parent learning this very early on. Like I said, we had those 3 boys in a row after our little perfect daughter who seemed to do nothing wrong, so we thought we were wonderful parents. And then these 3 boys came in a row, and they were all boys and just mischief, personified. And we were sitting at a sandbox, and one of the neighbors was one of those kinds of mom that thought like her kids could do no wrong. And everything was everybody else's kid's fault. Well, they were toggling over a toy, and my son hauled off and smacked her kiddo. And instead of saying, honey, what are your hands for? What is it that you need? And helping him learn in the situation, realizing he's 3 years old, he's frustrated, and helping him navigate it, I pounced on him. And after I reflected on it, I thought, I was so worried about her judging me and my parenting because of the way that my child was behaving that I totally lost my orientation to be able to parent effectively. And And I was really grateful to God for showing me that soon, that if I don't be aware that I have stuff in the game too, and kind of feel what I'm feeling and separate that out from our kids, that I was never going to be able to parent them effectively, or we were never going to be able to parent them effectively. And there were just countless things that whatever the kids were going through, just to deal with what we were feeling separately, what was going on with us, what was going on with us individually, what God was trying to show us, so that we could kind of sort us out and let them be separate so that we could really parent them as people. And I can remember one of our kids, she went through a kind of a rough patch in college, and she called me up and asked me to talk to me, and I kind of knew it was going to be a little rough, so I went up there and talked to her. She proceeded to tell me, some of the things that had happened, and, just trying to listen and love her and assure her I loved her, and, we'll get through this, you'll get through this, honey, everybody makes mistakes, we'll get back up, we'll go to confession, you'll get through this, what did you learn from this? But then I myself had to go to adoration, because I was a mess about it, and as I was sitting there with God, I thought, I really think I didn't expect this. I just thought that we wouldn't have to deal with these kinds of things. So it was a shock. And it was almost like I could feel God saying, did you really think you were going to be a perfect enough parent that your child wasn't going to struggle with their own stuff? And I had to honestly say, yes. I think I thought that if I would do everything right, that my kids wouldn't struggle, that they wouldn't have these kind of difficulties, that morally they would have it all together. And then I just felt him say, did you really think you were going to be a perfect enough parent that she wouldn't need a savior? And that one kind of hurt. But I had to be honest and say, yes, I think I did. I think I had an illusion that I was going to be such a wonderful parent, that I was going to prevent my kids from having to learn the lessons that only they could learn.
Great. Now, so as we progressed in our parenting, we talked about needing to stay unified. So our family, and all the components of our family had to stay unified. That was a big mission and goal of ours. And so, like my daughter, I don't know that I like the word failure, although that's what we're going to talk about, but it's those undesired opportunities. How are we going to deal with this, and with the powers that are going to be working, the power of good, the power of evil, and every opportunity that we have a choice. We have a choice to follow good or to go away from good. And in that, as we intend to unify ourselves, the first person we need to unify is with God, and stay unified as a couple with God and individually with God. And as parents, having that prayer life and that those times of adoration, keeping your family close, making sure making sure we're going to Mass and taking part of the sacraments. Those are very important things that we could give our children and that we could receive also. And so, realizing that our prayer life, the example we set for our children, creating a holy space, a holy environment, was something that we really strived for. And God never let us down, and He'll never let you down either. It's just He may take you on a road you don't want to go on. And you got to decide if that's how you're going to accept that. And so, prayer life, realizing, are we going to trust God, as Janet said earlier? Are we going to trust Him? Are we going to allow this opportunity to help us grow, or allow this opportunity to take us further away, to get bitter, to get resentful, to get angry, to get frustrated? Of course, those are things that we have to battle, but in battling them, really anchoring on to God as a family and as an individual, and praying for your children. The other unity that we had to work on, and it's very important, is unification of spouses. Right, Dawn? Okay. All right. So that takes on a lot of faces. As your children have challenges, they can certainly draw mother and dad apart. And one can take sides. One can feel like they're handling everything, and the other one's not doing much. To strive to be a team and to be of one accord is something that is very necessary. And I will say that Janet was a great mother to all 7 of our children. And there's times when no one's perfect, and we've had to really work together. But there's been, as a dad, there's been some times where engaging with all of the emotion and trauma and problems when I'm away at work all day, and coming back into that was very challenging for me, and quite frankly avoided it at times. And but God is great, because He gave us 7 children, and there's a lot of redo moments available. So
If at first you don't succeed, try again.
got to keep trying. So as we learn through the years, we keep trying, we keep striving. Never gain perfection, because that's not what it's about. But keep striving to be better and better. And so those opportunities are definitely there. Complementarity between spouses needs to be really adhered to and realized. When we were, there was a couple interesting times, but one time I remember is when our 7th child, Grace, was adopted from Guatemala. And so I typically handled the details, I handled the paperwork, I handled covering all those stinking school books that came home. I don't know if you guys did that with paper bags. I mean, 6 kids' school books in 2 days. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. But I did all that. And when those cloth book covers came out, I was so happy. But I was really frustrated with a table full of paperwork with Grace's adoption, and I just shook my head one day and I said, honey, I just can't do this. I just can't do it. And like she is a great partner and a great helpmate and a wonderful wife and voice of God, she had me on the back seat and said, come on, honey, we can do it, we'll do it together. And so we proceeded together. The other time that Jan and I gave each other a night away for a prayer group every week. And so mine was Wednesday night. I had a little routine I did. It was very good, including mopping the floor, right? After the kids were in bed, bathing 4 or 5 children at the time, putting them to bed, etc. One night she came home and she said, what's wrong? I said, I gotta show you something. And I went and moved the picture in my daughter's room and showed her the hole that I had hit through the wall out of frustration. And her comment was, honey, at least you didn't hit the kids.
You can cover it with a picture.
That's right. And so, her graciousness and understanding has carried us through quite a bit. And so that complementarity has been wonderful, and learning to grow in that as we've gotten older and have time and time again another chance. The next thing is talking to or about our children and staying unified with them and their challenges and their struggles. Realizing that God gave them to you. They are good. They are good. Children are good. We're all good. We're all inherently good. We're made good, and just keep reminding yourself of that as the challenges mount or as they continue. But realizing, we're there to parent our kids, and if we turn our back on them, what about God our Father turning His back on us? Well, that doesn't happen. So trying to be that holy parent or that parent of virtue to your child, and realizing that these are opportunities for all of us to grow. So all of us, the child, the parent, even siblings, hearing stories about how mom handled that or dad handled that, or what the sibling went through, and really growing as a family through those challenges. And so I learned a lot about one of my children when they were having some difficulty, and I didn't understand the educational process at all. I didn't understand any of it, and the school psychologist evaluated them, and they said, you know what? That's the hardest working kid I think I've ever met. And here I thought they were being lazy. They weren't doing their schoolwork. You know, they weren't doing their homework. It's just that they didn't understand or have the capacity or capability to do it in that traditional setting. And so just then really, you know, just learning and really praising God for that revelation, but feeling like a schmuck as a dad, right? And so, but yet, you know, a little wrist slap from God and get back on the horse and keep on going. Another unification, I think, that we've learned through our challenges with our children is knowing that the people that are put in our lives are good people also. The teachers, the coaches, the volunteers, the leaders of, you know, the scout troops, administrators, people that are set in your kids' paths to lead them, to be their mentors, or to be their authorities. So those authority figures in our children's lives we had to honor, and we had to support, and we had to unify with in a lot of our situations with our kids. And so whether it was an academic problem, a conduct problem, whatever kind of problem there was, there were several, but whatever kind of problem, us respecting the authority and making our children do the same. And so everyone works together to solve the problem and to grow. And so it's been a huge blessing growing up with Janet as a parent, and we just thank God for the opportunity.
Yeah,
So.
we just always said to him, we just never permitted them to blame the teacher, the coach, the referee, the whatever, that, you know, to trust the authority, that you have to be respectful, you have to be accountable for what you have done, and you have to learn to respect authority. That was a really important thing for us with the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
So God is a God of mercy for everyone.
Yes. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.
We are Andy and Amy Mayer, and Betsy asked us if we would join the conversation tonight just regarding relating to the book, to some of our life and our children's lives. We have been married for 26 years, and we have 5 kids. Aaron is 25, Molly's 23, AJ's 19, and Michael's 18, and Anna is 13. We've been at St. Pius for a little over 20 years, being at the grade school, and we feel like, kind of like the Lee said, we don't really like the word failure as far as talking about the gift of failure. We'd like to say more like the things we've had in our life that relate to any kind of distractions or adversity, or when life doesn't quite go exactly the way you've planned. And so we're going to be here tonight talking a little bit about how that relates to our kids and our family, and some of the experiences we've had in the sports arena. Andy and I both grew up definitely playing sports, and in our family, sports were a part of our lives. Some competition, being a part of teams, and even when we had kids when they were young, we played sports all the time with the kids. We had our first 2 were pretty easy and good. The girls sat and played puzzles and did arts and crafts, and we thought we were pretty good parents, that they were so well behaved and did what we asked, and they were pretty calm until the boys came along, and they were very active. I know our first boy was 8 months old, literally running around the house, undoing the locks in the house and climbing the refrigerator. And I remember calling him at work saying, what am I going to do with him all day long? And so we did. We kind of started, even with the girls included, playing sports in the front yard, and it got to be really our routine all day long. Playing baseball, football, basketball in the basement, rollerblading, riding bikes, just a little bit of everything. So it kind of from the beginning was pretty much part of our lives with our kids, starting when they were very young.
Mm-hmm. Part of our routine. Mm-hmm. So I've been tasked to talk a little bit about 5, 6, 7 things that I felt like helped us through the process of youth sports. And we're talking sort of the St. Pius community, so we're talking this, kind of the younger kids and maybe at the younger age group. This is by no means the end-all be-all, and it certainly doesn't mean that we knew what we were doing as we were going through this process. But there's things that we did at the time that worked for us. There's things that we didn't, and now as we're a little bit older, and we see, and our kids are older and in an older arena, there's things that we might be able to pass on that help a little bit. And that's really all we're trying to do. You're going to have to make your own decisions. You're going to have to figure out how you want to handle your kids' sort of athletic careers as they progress and they move on. But these are things that, we hope might help a little bit. So the first thing that came to my mind instantly when I was asked to do this is, when our kids were very young, Amy and I both made a conscious decision to expose them to as much as we possibly could. As many sports as we could, as many as we could make happen sort of in the financial structure that we had at the time, and the work environment that I had and that Amy had at the time, to give them an opportunity to figure out what they liked, what they didn't like, what they were good at, what they enjoyed doing, and what they failed at. And when little kids start playing any sport, no matter what it is, there's going to be some natural ability, there's going to be some natural instincts, but they're going to fail, and they're going to fail a lot when they're young. So we felt like it was important, because of our backgrounds, that we expose them to as much as we can. All of them: football, baseball, basketball, swimming, soccer, tennis, golf, even hockey, which we don't know anything about here. We even attempted to do a little bit of hockey, which we didn't know anything about, and which we figured out nobody really had an interest in our family, but it was good because we kind of went that route. And I feel like that's really important, because we need to let failure happen for these kids at a really young age. We don't need to baby them. You don't need to fix everything all the time. You just need to support them. And when you're playing, it doesn't need to be organized. It can be playing wiffle ball in the backyard. It can be playing hoops, in your driveway. It can be swimming, in your backyard. But expose these kids at a young age to as much as you possibly can, to allow them to figure out what they like to do, what they enjoy doing, what they do well, maybe what they don't do well, because it's natural that that's all going to happen.
And you figure out right away, naturally, what their inherent gifts are. What is their personality? What are they drawn to? What do they enjoy doing? We have a couple examples of our oldest, who is aggressive and competitive and loved the competitive sports. The second one came along just to do it because that's what everybody did, as far as even our extended family, aunts and uncles, cousins, and everybody. Absolutely. You knew you were joining a team, and somebody was good, your grandpa or your aunt, everybody was going to coach you. And right away, she, knew a couple times she'd get in the car and I'd be telling her about this and that, about the game and what she could do better, or this and that. And she looked at me and said, Mom, don't you think I'm trying my best? Like, I am doing my best. And I'll never forget, I'm like, that's the last time I started commenting about anything in the car after a game. But she was the one that just had fun being with her friends. She loved putting her cute ribbons in her hair and going for ice cream after the game. And we knew right away, it's fine, that's not
okay.
What she was being drawn to do.
Exactly.
She loved dancing and loved that, enjoyed it, completely mastered it, and did drama and stuff in high school and went on a whole different path. And we think a lot about what it would have been like if we tried to make her fit into this mold of this competitive sports, when that wasn't really her.
Right.
That wasn't really her thing.
Right. So the first point I think that we're trying to make is, we would encourage you to expose your kids to everything you possibly can to allow them to figure out what they like to do. I guess that's really the message. The second point that I'd like to communicate is, at a very young age, we tried and hopefully succeeded in a lot of ways, and I'm sure failed in some, but we needed to communicate to our kids that winning isn't everything. It's easy to say. We've heard that since we were kids. They've been saying that forever. But it's really true, particularly at a young age. the important piece of sports and competitive sports is being a good teammate, the preparation and learning how to prepare, working hard, not only for yourself, but your team and your coaches, respecting the authority of your coaches and understanding what that means and how do you incorporate that into your daily life. So at a very young age, we tried to encourage our kids to show up at every practice and practice as hard as you possibly can.
Practice is more important than the game.
Absolutely.
Most of the time.
Respect your coaches. We luckily never had to deal with anybody, talking back to their coaches or whatever, but we had some friends who did. So we encouraged, respect your coaches, respect your teammates, and that winning wasn't everything, particularly at a young age, the competition, the learning how to prepare, the understanding that you're going to fail and you're not going to win and you're not going to play well every game. That's the important piece
And you move on.
at a very young age. And you move on. And that doesn't mean you're not upset. And that doesn't mean that you're, happy about it. And that doesn't mean that you don't get in the car and
be mad for a second.
and you'll be mad for a second. You take the lessons out of the failure and you come back the next day at practice or the games or whatever it is, and you continue to work and you work and you work. Because nobody at an older age has ever been successful without working through failure, working through losses, working through injuries, working through all those things. So that's kind of my second point, and I think that's the thing that I wanted to make sure that you guys heard from me was our message, at least we hope our message was from a very early age, was to show up and work hard. Don't worry about the winning, because the winning will take care of itself when it needs to take care of itself. The third point, and this is really, really important, and we worked really hard at this, I think, we hope we did, again, is do not compare your kids to their siblings, to their teammates, to the kids in the neighborhood, to their cousins, particularly in big families. It's really hard when you have older kids who have gone through the process, maybe had some success, and then you've got some younger kids coming through, and you say, well, the older one didn't do this, or the older one acted like this, or the older one was willing to do this, and this one isn't. Every kid's going to develop at their own pace. They have their own skill level. They have their own interests. You can guide, you can navigate, and that's sort of the term I always tried to use is, it's our job to navigate through kind of the quagmire of what athletics is. We need to navigate, but we're not driving the bus. The bus driver is the kid. We're helping navigate where they want to go. And it's a communication of how interested are you, how good are you, how hard do you want to work, what kind of sacrifices do you want to make. Based on those conversations, I'm going to help navigate what your goals are.
And having realistic expectations. I think for yourself to have realistic expectations of your child and knowing what they're really, maybe you're going to navigate them and help them go this way if their gift isn't this way. And for them, and it's kind of hard sometimes, to be honest with the child too, and
Really
be like,
hard.
when they, an example of that is our youngest one is super athletic and super able, but she, I think, has seen all the running around and all the rigmarole with all the other sports we've done, and she hasn't had a huge interest in wanting to do select sports, and she's played all the sports and having a good time and totally improving each year, but I keep saying, are you sure, high school's going to be tricky? The tryouts are going to be tricky at Notre Dame. She's determined to go there. And every year I've asked her on all 3 levels of sports that she's playing, and she hasn't wanted to do it. So I've been real honest with her about it, and it'll be interesting because she's still holding her ground there, and I'm not going to make her. I'm certainly not going to make her and say, well, if this is what your intent is, then you have to do this, because I'm letting her drive the bus and she'll deal with those consequences.
We help
when they
navigate.
come.
We do what
Yeah.
we can do. She's
But
wanted
having
to do the
realistic-
local stuff, and that's great.
She's having just a good time. Yeah.
And maybe there'll be a point where that switch flips, and at that point, we'll flip our switch to help navigate that path too. But that's one of the most important things on our end, I think, is don't compare them. Let them be their own kid. Let them develop at their own pace. Let them enjoy what they enjoy. And you help facilitate that. That's sort
And
of the
to
message.
also, I think within the family, and to not really compare them to other kids that they might be on the team with, or people that are in your social settings. I think
Right.
that was tricky growing up. Some people, I feel like, wanted their kids to be a part of something, and maybe that wasn't really their natural ability in, say, basketball or football or baseball, when you could tell the child was into Legos or robotics or whatever. I feel like you can't compare your children to other children on any level, whether it's academically or athletically, to just be okay with naturally what, the gifts that God's given them.
Right. The next thing we really wanted to talk about is kind of evaluating the situation that your child is in socially. Is it a healthy environment for them? Does it build up their self-esteem? Are they in over their head? Are they at a level that maybe they can't compete at this time? The world's full of people who develop a little bit later. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's an awareness as your kids are growing up where they are. It's a little bit of what we talked about in the last point, but you need to make sure that the social environment, when your child is in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, matches what your goals are for them socially. Are they making friends? Do they have good examples as coaches? Again, do they wake up and want to go to practice, and do they want to work hard, and do they want to get better? Those are all things to take into account. So,
And are they gaining confidence from it?
Yeah.
Or is it helping their self-esteem? Is it making them be a better version of themselves? Or
do they feel beat up?
is it
When
going
they
the
come home from
contrary?
practice every night, do they feel like they just took a butt whipping from their coach or the kids or whatever? So that's an evaluation process. And I certainly am not, and I know Amy shares this, we're not saying to make it easy for them. We're not saying to pat them on the back and make it all better. But you have to evaluate socially, is the environment they're in at that time the environment that's making them better people, helping them grow, making them a better player? And if it isn't, then it's time to reevaluate. And it's okay to do that. And it's not okay to do that in the middle of the year and your kid quits, but at the end of the year, evaluate where they are and understanding that there's options, because there's a lot of them. And I think that's a big piece of it, is to understand what that means for them socially.
And also, so I think when they're young, it is a little easier to protect them a little bit from those things. You're in a little bit more control of of their environment and their atmosphere. But I don't want people to think that we haven't had our own challenges and failures to overcome. And I feel like as they get older, the challenges find them. I think Father referenced this a little bit, that 50% of our life is stuff that we make choices about, and I think 50% of it is our life happening to us. And I think as the kids are younger, you don't see that quite as much, because we have them right under our wings, and we can kind of, put their boundaries out there for them. And as they get older, I feel like the challenges find them a little bit more. And it's just so interesting and been so beautiful, the lessons that our kids have learned through allowing some of the failures and allowing the disappointments and challenges and really hardships. It's not even allowing them, because some of them have just happened.
Right.
Whether it's, we've had a daughter, we've gone through some health scare with one of our daughters having a brain tumor and still suffering from the residual effects of that. Some of the successes with the boys, I think some people forget what comes with the success is the stress that comes from always being successful, and the pressure from the community, and people always expect a certain amount of another word for success. And just that puts pressure, and that sometimes might lead to stress and anxiety, that you have to learn to deal with all those things. And just working through it, I think those are the times when you're a little vulnerable, and it's hard to watch your child for the first time be at a place of
Insecurity.
instability, the uncertainty, and those are the times that you're afraid too for your child. You're afraid a little bit, and you're, like the Lees talked about, nobody really loves that feeling, but it's that moment that there's only one place you can turn to, and it's how are we going to rely on God, and how can we take this not so perfect moment, not so great of a moment, and learn from it. What direction is God taking us to? What are the things you learn about yourself? And it is to get to that grit and to teach your kid at a young age to fight through something and to battle it. It really gives them some great confidence.
Well, it's
It gives them
invaluable.
It's invaluable, the lessons learned from not, oh, we're gonna let that coach have it, or we're gonna you're gonna leave that team, or I'm trying to think of some of the adversities that your humanness, and as a parent, your natural instinct is to want to fight or resist, like Janet said, and to allow it to happen, and to watch your child get to the bottom, be kind of at the bottom for a minute, and to
dig their way out of
dig
it.
their way out of it.
And part of the beauty of that is the unadulterated 100% support of that child's parents. And that's kind of my next point, ties right into what Amy was saying. No matter what happens, if your kid shows up and he works hard and he practices hard and he keeps his mouth shut and he wants to get better and he respects his coaches, you have our 100% support. And your kid should have yours too, through all the successes and all the failures. Because your kid is not going to need a pat on the back when they win the championship. Your kid's gonna need a hug and a pat on the back, and maybe a kick in the rear end when they are down a little bit. And that's where the 100% support of your child, unadulterated support, is the most beneficial for them. And all of our kids have had it at all levels. We're talking about sports. So I would encourage all of you, when your kid's doing great, you're obviously going to support him. When your kid's not doing great, or he's having a little bit of a tough time, that's where they need the support most. That would be my next point, and that ties in directly with what Amy was just talking about. That's the most important piece of your kid digging out of the doldrums and fighting back and sort of gaining that grit that we've used a lot tonight. So that's a big piece of it.
And I think from I think a couple things. I think our kids can learn from us as parents, like how do they see us react when things aren't going that great in our lives, whether it's financially,
work, or your marriage,
work,
or any of
your
it.
marriage, like a pandemic that's turning your whole world upside down. I just think it's so important to really just be setting an example that how do we react? Are we patient in the suffering? Do we endure it? Do we, are we trying to look toward God and like, what is he trying to show us in all this? And then we know through all of it, the overcoming some humiliation, overcoming the embarrassment, overcoming maybe remarks from the community, all those different things build your self-esteem and confidence, and it is, I think, all part of God's plan to help us become the better version of ourselves.
Absolutely. So there's two, small remaining pieces that I wanted to make sure that I talked a little bit about. Amy will have some more to talk about. But there's two pieces tied to athletics directly that I really believe in. I believed in some of it when my kids were younger. I believe in more of it now, and it takes sort of time to develop as you mature as a parent. Number one is, we are, as parents, we are not a reflection of our kids' athletic success or failures. Because your kid's going to fail. They're not going to win. And they're going to have some successes, hopefully. We're not a reflection of either one of those. we're a reflection of how they react to those, good and bad. So you can't react, or you can work on not reacting either way. When your kid has great success, be humble. Teach them to be humble. Teach them to be respectful. When your kid maybe has not had some success and has some failures, be humble. Be respectful. Show a little grit and be ready to fight back. And know that your friends, in large part the community, whether it's your community in your neighborhood or your school or the city where you live, they do not look at your kid's success or failure as a reflection on you. They look at how hard your kid works and the young people that they are in the community as a reflection of you. That's hard to do at first, really hard, but it's important. It's easier as you get older because you see those things in the community and how it plays out, through your experiences. So that's number one. The second thing that's helped me quite a bit over the years, not only as a parent but as a player, is there is a large section of the community, even your local community, who couldn't care less your athletic success. Whether you win, whether you lose, whether you play, whether you don't, there's a large part of the community that you live in and the world that we live in that doesn't even care about sports.
There's a lot more world going on.
Right. There's a whole lot going on. There's a whole lot of people who have other interests. That doesn't mean that it's not important, because it is. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention to what our kids want to do in the
You have to have an
athletic.
awareness.
Right,
about
but
it.
you have to have an awareness that there's a whole community and there's a whole load of people who don't care. They have their own things that they're dealing with. They have their own lives that they're living. They have their own issues. They have their own successes too. There's kids that get 36 on ACT.
It doesn't
They
get
should be
announced on the
celebrated
news.
and nobody even knows
Yeah.
that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So that's an important piece, that what we're doing with our kids athletically as they grow up from a young age to an old age, it's important. It's a big piece of a lot of people's lives. It's a huge piece of ours. We felt like it was going to be when we started our family. It's maybe even been more than we thought it would.
For sure.
It's brought great joy and it's brought some suffering. And through it all, I hope that we've become better people. I hope that our kids have become better people. And as they continue their athletic careers, and we've got some who are done, we've got some in the middle of them, and some that are old, they're able to take some of those lessons and just continue to grind and continue to work and continue to be better people and better teammates and better players, and just keep working. Because the joy is in the work, and the joy is in the successes that come with the hard work.
Working hard.
And that's sort of
And
my
the lessons
message.
that you're learning from being a part of the
Right.
team, or everything you've learned in your experience of being a part of athletics, is what's helping you as a regular person in society. Just
That's
a
exactly
regular,
right.
you're gonna grow up and it's gonna help you with things being a spouse and a parent and brother, sister, and friend. And I mean, I feel like we've always kind of talked to the kids about leadership as well, as far as,
Yeah.
we hold the bar kind of high, like, mediocre really isn't, but in all levels, all aspects of your life, to kind of
Right.
set the bar high for yourself and have high expectations, on the field and as a Christian and as a part of your family and a part of your school, society, and
Right.
community and everything else.
And you
But-
just work hard, you continue to be a good person, and you show up every day and work as hard as you possibly can.
And you got
And
a
good
background.
things are gonna happen.
So I think we'll just end, just summarize, I feel like when we look past at all of our parenting, whether it's been sports related or not, and some of the adversity or hardships that we've dealt with, that I think almost every parent can say they've dealt with. I know my common response to a lot of it is, we try to say, your world is this giant bubble that God has created for you. And at the time, even though a hardship seems so big and so overwhelming, and like sometimes it feels like the end of the world, really, we try to tell the kids just to keep it really small. Keep it small. Don't make the problem, or don't make the hardship, don't make the suffering bigger than life, and certainly not bigger than God. I just feel like it keeps it in perspective if we realize that this is just part of the plan, and it's not always completely the way we want it to go, but you know, he does have a plan, and it's like the Lee said, you have to trust in the plan, and just to don't make the failure bigger than life. That God is bigger than it all, and it keeps it in perspective to keep it small at the moment. And after the years go by, and you can look back and you see that that is true, because certainly life and love and laughter and memories and family and your spiritual life, everything's bigger than.
Right, and you'll see how you built on these failures or the non-successes. You'll see how that plays a part in your professional life, your married life, your parental life, and that's really the goal for all of us.
Yeah. All right, I think that's
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. I think you would agree with me. We had some great presentations. Same, ideal, that trusting God, but different approaches in the sense of their experiences. We teach the kids all the time the word shape by God to be wonderful. And SHAPE is an acronym. And the acronym for the E part is their experiences. Father Matthew talked about all of this is part of our journey, and our experiences shape our journey and help us become the people God intended us to be. And then the Lees talked about that God is bigger than anything that we will ever embrace, any challenge. It reminds me when my kids were little, there was some movie on VeggieTales, God is bigger than the boogeyman. And that was to tell the kids, God is bigger than anything that we can encounter. And then the mayors ended the evening with something that Andy said. He said, we are not a reflection of our kids' successes or failures, but we can be a reflection of how they respond to those successes and failures and the character they develop from them. And what a beautiful thing to end on, in our response to our children, and in that moment of a great success, but also in that moment of failure. So we end tonight. Once again, I thank you. I thank you for partnering with us throughout this whole NTI process. But hopefully this acted as a moment to kind of give us a pep talk as we embrace the challenges that may come from the rest of this pandemic journey. Have a great night.